This is Phil Rosebrook, partner at Business Mentors, and you are listening to Restoration Edge. With that, I'm really honored to have Rod Cruz as my guest today. And Rod's got some really great things going on. First is Trifecta Growth Institute, where he helps bring leadership tools to restorers to various levels and positions in a company. But what I'm really excited to talk about today is the Hire a Veteran program as well. And so, Rod, I'm going to throw it over to you. I'd love for you to do just a great introduction on kind of who you are and where you stand in the industry and what your experience is. Tell us a little about Trifecta, and then tell us how you leveraged into the Hire a Veteran and how those programs are working to help restorers today.
Yeah, absolutely. And Philip, thank you so much. Appreciate you having me on the show today. And I think what you're doing is a great thing for the industry. So really appreciate that. Yeah, so I'm Rod Cruz. I'm the owner, founder of Trifecta Growth Institute. It's where we grow businesses by growing people. And our focus is on training, leadership development, and also coaching people to have better leaders within their organization. Myself, I did 21 years as a Green Beret and Ranger in the United States Army. And after I retired from that luxurious career, I started my first company and was in the industry, the defense industry. And sometimes the apple or the acorn doesn't fall far from the tree. But over the years, I had a few businesses, and then I ended up buying a failing restoration industry, which brought me into this industry and turned that business around fairly quickly. And, after I exited a few years back, started Trifecta Growth Institute and started it because of a lot of the things that I experienced when having to turn around that failing restoration company. And so we based that on like a lot of training, a lot of leadership development. And then, what can we do to help out restorers take their companies to the next level?
Okay. Yeah. So one of the things you'd mentioned, and we didn't get into hire veterans, and I want to hear about that. But when you said
Yeah.
we train leaders in the industry, what does that mean? I mean, so I remember Robin Sharma wrote a book that was, it wasn't Robin Sharma. Yeah, maybe it was. It was The Leader with No Title. And he had suggested where leaders fall in organizations. And to you, what does that look like? And what does leadership, when you do leadership training, what does that do for a restoration, an individual in the restoration company, as well as the company? Like, why does the company care?
Yeah, that's a great question. And, I've been developing leaders for a long time. I did it when I was in the military. A lot of things people don't realize about special forces and Green Berets is that we actually work with host nation soldiers. We also work with the ambassadors and a lot of strategic resources. And a lot of times we are developing their leaders and we're just doing it in a foreign language and we're trying to set it up to where they can develop. And so that's kind of where I got my start in it. When I came into the restoration industry, I noticed, in my own company, there was a huge void. And providing leadership development for your team, whether, they were a peer before or they became, you promoted them into a team lead or a mid-level manager. And a lot of people don't realize that project managers and them, they're leading teams. And, whether it's a subcontractor or people within their organization. And we see a big void there. So we have programs right now. We just actually were releasing one this week that's called Peer to Boss. And that's for people that were in the operations and now are starting to lead. How do they get through the first 90 days? What's some of the stuff they're experiencing? And we feel like if you are somebody who is going to devote some time and taking someone who's, been in your industry and now working with peers and you're going to elevate their status, you got to give them some tools. There's one thing, like you said, yeah, you have no title. But in reality, if you're going to promote them, you've got to be able to recognize them and enable them for success. Or what ends up happening is, the same things that worked in the field doesn't necessarily work when you're leading a team or, others. Or others will start to take advantage of you or think their friendships, that it's kind of hard to get out of that friendship piece. Or now you're leading them and for them to take you seriously. So we do have a course for that. But more importantly, we developed a program called Trifecta's Leadership Mastery Program. And that program, it starts out with shaping your leadership identity all the way up through delegation, conflict management. And the reason we put that in is because if you think about it, even today, when you have leaders, if they've never had any formal training, they struggle and are trying to develop a team. And maybe they had a good mentor or somebody that they were working with in the past and they can emulate that. But that's not always the case. A lot of times, they have nobody to do that and they're trying to figure it out. And that's, I can't tell you how many times I've heard bosses tell people that go figure it out. And you're really doing a disservice or injustice to that person when you're putting that together. To answer your question, what it does for a team or a company, we just finished up one of our leadership courses, and we had a company that brought six of their team members there. And the actual owner himself has been in business for over 30 years in this industry. And I remember him and I talking, and he's like, well, originally he was going to send his son, and then he asked me, and I said, you know what? Bring your entire team. You're going to get your best benefit by bringing your entire team. And he says, why do I need to do that? And I said, well, first of all, you're going to learn a lot about your team by doing that. Second of all, it's going to show that you're vulnerable enough to put yourself in that situation, and it's going to show that you're leading. And I said, third of all, why would you not want to walk out of there and have, with your team looking at you and going, wow, he cares about my professional development. And at the end of it, we did an interview with him afterwards, and it's funny, throughout the whole time he's we're talking back and forth, and he's like, Rod, I can't tell you how much I love this course. I can't tell you how much it's bringing out my team, and it's bringing them out of their shell, and they're like communicating, and we're collaborating, and we're talking about this stuff even when we're not in the cohort class and stuff. So, and at the end of it, he's really, his team has grown in just a short 6-week period. And he said it's opening new avenues for him to take his company to the next level.
Fantastic. So I'm going to speak on a couple things there and just support what you said. So a long time ago, I've been working in the restoration industry for 40 years, but working with restorers for 30 years. And I go into markets, and so this is my first 10 years as a consultant. I started looking back and saying, okay, what makes one company successful versus the other? And I tried to remove some of the other issues and just saying, okay, we got similar marketplaces, we have similar size companies, and so I'm trying to think, one was successful, one wasn't. What did they do differently? And so my first thought was, what popped in my mind was, gosh, these companies that are really doing well, the owner was marketing, and that was the difference. And then I started looking and saying, okay, well, kind of yes and kind of no. It dawned on me, really, the key element that was differentiating between the struggling and successful companies. And this is true today. So now I'll tell you, this was me thinking around and noodling this idea back in 2003. But now looking at it over a longer span, it is true that the successful companies are run by a successful leader, and strong leadership was starting to develop that. And it wasn't just at the top. And so I was telling a story to Mark Springer with Dayspring Restoration, probably 2010, and it hit a note with him. And so what he did is said, okay, if I'm a good leader, my goal is to build leaders underneath of me. When I build leaders underneath of me, then I'm going to be successful, and they're going to help other people below that. And so he actually created programs in his company to develop leadership skills at all levels within his company. And I think it's really important because those leaders will help carry you and lift you up as a good leader yourself. And so that's the first story that I thought is leadership is one of the most fundamental elements in successful companies. And I think that's with technology, with AI, with whether it's marketing, not marketing, whatever. Dial it in, go look at it, and develop your leadership skills that help you become successful. And I think that's a really, really important element. And the second thing you said was the owner wasn't going to go. And I think with any change or element in any organization, like we're going to change, here's our new program, this is what we're going to do. And to prevent that from being the flavor of the month program, the owner needs to buy in and say, you know what, this is fundamental. This is important to me. So therefore, it should be important to you. And we're going to develop and execute and roll this out. And so the owner starts. and then the other people buy in. They have ownership of this as well. And that's effective leadership is I'm going to drive it, but then I'm going to have the rest of the people come along with me and I help them get buy-in to this program as well. So I think on all those things you said, I think that's really phenomenal. And so just to enhance and support what you said, and that's why I think what you're doing, Rod, is so fantastic in helping people become leaders. I think it leverages the skill set in any company and makes the company better, drives the company further, and they'll excel and achieve when it's not just the owner's idea or when it's not just the employee's idea, thinking, does the owner buy in and understand? It's everybody collectively moving forward. And I think that that's really, really substantial. And I think that's why it's so cool what you're doing, Rod. So it
Thanks.
wasn't just a
Appreciate that.
teaser. Yeah, you betcha. So it wasn't just a teaser. I really want you to talk about the Hire a Veteran program because when you told me about this before, I thought this is really a cool idea. First, I'm just going to say so I'm not doing all the talking, but I'm going to set up the question and say what I've found is that people who work in the military are really, really fantastic restorers. The skill set is, I think it transfers really well. The military, having hierarchy, having people who are following orders, people who have accountability, who
Yeah.
are used to working maybe in bad conditions at all times of day and night. All those things transfer really, really well. And so now you've got a way in which you can say, I can access this talent skill, these people, and I can bring them to the restoration industry. And guess what? It's going to be of great value to everybody. And so please tell us exactly how this Hire a Veteran works and how to facilitate that and what it all means. So tell us about that.
And Philip, I'm really excited about this program. We've been working on this thing at this, for a little over 2.5 years, believe it or not. And what we, I'm just like you, I mean, I think there's a very good opportunity in this industry to bring in veterans. And, I've noticed that it is a very, very good industry. Number one, they're used to selfless sacrifice, and so we look at this as a service-oriented industry, and that is the first thing. Number two, they do have the accountability and they take ownership, which sometimes can be very difficult to find or to try to get that instilled in people. And then third, they also bring a level of leadership and initiative to the industry. And that desire that they've taken within, some of them maybe in 4 years, some of them maybe in 20 years. And when you can take that type of discipline that they bring in, that accountability, their ability to want to learn and do the best they can, and if you can enable that, man, you really have a great, great employee. And I don't feel like, I didn't feel like this industry was tapping into that enough. We had veterans work for us, and I used to hire them and bring them in, even though they had no knowledge about the restoration industry. But what I did find out that once we brought them in and we gave them a little bit of training, then they took off very quickly. And that is what what I wanted to bring to this industry. And so, as we worked on this and trying to get approval and getting the ability to be able to tap into those transition veterans, we wanted to make this program, very beneficial. We want to make it a win for this transitioning service member, win for the restoration company, and a win for us too, and being able to make that connection and deliver that talent. And, I hear a lot of times the industry says we have a recruiting problem or we have a employee retention or an employee recruiting problem. And, I will say that is difficult, but I feel like we're not looking in the right places. And we're also not asking or trying to attract the right talent in this industry. And to me, the Hire a Veteran program is that right talent that we want to bring in. So with that said, we're launching this week, towards the end of the week, and it's going to allow companies to come in and get access to transitioning veterans. And the way it works is, first of all, you have to partner with us and enroll with us. And that's where we bring you on board. We do have an onboarding program, and we have to put you into our system. We'll have to work with you to determine what are your requirements. Where is your requirements? What are you looking to try to get out of that candidate. If it's whether it's a project coordinator, a project administrator, project manager, even a general manager at that point. So we want to make sure we define that. And we also want to make sure that that attraction is attracting the right people because we're dealing with people that are, different ranks in the military, but it may be also different times of service in the military. And so when you really look at like a project coordinator, project manager, somebody you're going to put in there, that's more like that NCO or that blue collar worker in the military that's been in that 4, 5, 6, 7 year mark. That's going to be our best benefit. So we want to make sure we're attracting them to be able to make the connection. Once we do that, then we'll post that out to our database, and then we look for a candidate that's going to meet that criteria. Once we find that, then we will link up the contractor with the veteran and they get a chance to interview and verify, ask questions and see if that was going to be a right fit for them. See if it's a right fit for the transitioning veteran as well. And the good thing about veterans is a lot of times, they join from all over the country. And a lot of times they want to go back to their home, where they came from. So just because they're at Fort Bragg, North Carolina, doesn't mean they don't want to go get a job in Dallas, Texas. So the good thing about it is, as long as we know that they're wanting to transition into that market where you're at, then we can attract it. And then the other benefit, once we do make that attraction, is then we train them. We bring them in for the first 30 days. At that point, we're teaching them, project management. We're bringing them into welcome to the industry. We're teaching them about the customer experience. We're teaching them how they're going to handle conflict with vendors, subcontractors, homeowners. And so we're giving them truly a head start, where a lot of times when contractors bring them on, they may not have an onboarding program. They don't have the time to train their people that they bring on. And a lot of times they get thrown into a right seat ride or what they think is an onboarding program. Right? I can't tell you how many times I've heard that. Oh, we got a great onboarding program. But we're gonna let them ride. We're gonna let them ride with Joe for a week, and then we're gonna kick them out to the wolves, and they wonder why they don't perform. But we give them that initial training on there, and then also we transition them to part of our leadership training, and that's a week of them. How do we take the military leadership they have there and be able to present that to whoever they're going to go work for, and how does that translate to the business world? And that's a big deal because I think that sets them up for success. They're showing up at a higher level than what you would normally do. And then the last piece of it, which I think is a huge benefit for both parties, is that they have, depending, they may have 30 days, 60 days left in the military to up to 180. At that point in time, once they get trained, then we give them to you so you can have a internship and they can get some on-the-job training. And we have a program that is a true onboarding program that can take them out to that. And then that way you get to see what you're getting before you give them an offer letter. And the good thing about it is you don't even have to pay them. And that is a huge benefit for the contractor. And at the end of that, you get to make the determination if you want to bring them on board. And also that's a two-way street because they get to make the determination if they want to come to your organization as well.
Let's go back for clarification and repeat some stuff just to make sure everybody gets it, including when I get it, I figure that maybe other people would get it. So the first step is this welcome to the restoration industry. It's kind of an orientation, onboarding. This is before they ever show up at the restoration company. You're a candidate and we think we like you and we want you to go through this. And so I'm guessing that the restoration company is funding the training part, but not the compensation. So the first part is step one, orientation. And then you had said, then we transition them into the leadership program, or there's an option to transition to the leadership program. So explain step one, step two, how do they quantify or clarify when they go from one to the other? And what does that look like? And I think that the answer to those questions maybe will then lead me to other ones, but clarify step one and step two before we even get to step three.
Yeah, absolutely. So we have roughly, it's a 160-hour program. So they come in, they get welcome to the industry first, and there is a series of that. Then at that point, we bring them into project management, which is really, if you think about a restoration company or construction company or someone in that area, their true value proposition, what they're offering the homeowner or the property manager or what or whoever they're working for, is the project management aspect of it. Anybody can go hire somebody off Craigslist and go get a painter or go get a drywall or anything like that. But what a true restoration, home restoration or property restoration contractor brings is they bring all those trades to the table. And project management is what integrates everything together for the successful project. And so our industry has a big problem with that because they don't teach people a lot of times, or they get it, here or there. If you got a good organization, sure. And I'm saying not everyone, but most do not.
Mhm.
So we take them through that entire process, which is, I mean, quite a bit of hours we do that. And yeah, we may not be teaching them the exact process that you're using your company, but the principles and the baseline and how to prepare a project plan is what they're going to have when they come to you. And it's going to be with projects within this industry.
Mhm.
So that's the first 3 weeks that go through all that. And then we also bring it up to insurance carriers. How do they work with managed repair programs? How do they deal with that? What is the difference between that and a remodel? What is the difference between those type of customers? How do you work in the commercial world? What is the difference between water mitigation versus, reconstruction, or we have mold and those aspects of it. So they're giving an entire education in those first 3 weeks of our training program. From there, what we do then is we take on the fourth week, and the fourth week is nothing more than us being able to help them take and say, how does this correlate, my leadership correlate from what I did in the military and my positions in the military? How am I going to translate that to this business owner, executive, or my future boss of what they have, what my skill set is in the leadership world, to where I can help them, to where I can be a benefit and not a burden
Mhm.
on that. And that goes back to what we were talking about, developing people. And when we have people that understand and can make decisions at the lowest level and make, valid, assessments for us, that makes our jobs much easier and brings solutions to the table opposed to bringing problems to the table. And that's what we're doing at that last week. So then it's not just a resume, because a lot of times, and I think this is where a lot of this gets lost, for companies that are recruiting, because they tend to want to recruit for somebody who's been in the restoration world before. And a lot of times that resume is not written for that. And so we have to be able to read the tea leaves and see that they have those skill sets that we're looking for.
So that gets us through the first part of it, which is really fantastic. So I've got 3 weeks of orientation overview. I've got 1 week of translation, skill set translation, what you did and what you know to what you're going to do. Okay. So we got the first month taken care of, and that is the first step. Now we go into leadership training after that. And is this a fundamental part of it, or is this an option, or how does that work?
No, after that first month, then they go to the contractor's location.
Uh,
They get brought into your operations. And we have like the first 4 weeks, we have a schedule that we like to have them brought into, to where they can learn your organization. You do get some of the right seat ride then, to where they can start to see how this applies to your organization, and they can connect that dots from what we talk about within the industry to actual something that's tangible. And so then you can actually have them integrated into your system a lot quicker.
okay.
And then over the next 4 weeks, we're wanting you to get them to where they're doing work, and they're putting these pieces in play to where they're working up to their way up to an assistant project manager. Maybe it's a project they're doing project admin, project coordination the first 2 weeks. Then they can get into even some of the operations, whether it's in the water mitigation or the recon, depending where that's at. And so that you can bring them in, and they can ask some really, really good questions, and they can show what they're doing, and they can take it to application. And that can go as much as 5 months even.
Do you provide some sort of a framework for the orientation? Like you're releasing these people into the restoration world, which is restorers. We think that's brutal, but it's not Fallujah. So it's probably tame from what maybe some expectations might be. But do you provide a foundation or some sort of a checklists. Like you should experience these things for a coordinator. Try have them work in these areas, or have them job shadow and suggest the orientation parts to these positions. And if you don't, that might be a good idea to add to it.
No, we absolutely do. Yeah.
Okay.
And the other piece that we have to do, because I mean, in one sense, they're getting this at no cost, no labor cost for the company, right? That's taking them on, which is a huge benefit. Um, we also do check-ins with them and with the service transition service member and the company. And so we
Mhm.
have to report back, make sure that they are getting the best opportunity to be transitioned into there. And we do have those check marks, so that checklist per se, that what we're looking for, that we, they're not getting put into a corner and just sit over there and, click this or click that. We really want them to have an opportunity to do a true on the job training and internship. And if you have someone that's fortunate enough to be there for 5 months,
Mhm.
we would expect that after 5 months they're running projects by themselves.
Sure.
At that point, they're fully on board running projects themselves, and you've had them for 5 months at no cost to you on that labor.
When you first mentioned this, and you ran this idea across, I'm like, okay, this is unfathomable. They are working in the restoration company for free. Explain how that works. Why is that possible? What does that mean? And is there who's footing the bill? How is this person, they're not working for free. So explain that part of the process. And this is what is, I mean, this is amazing. So explain that.
Yeah. So we're part of a program that allows, and they want to transition service members back into the civilian sector. And so this is a program that we've applied for. They have to apply for and get approved. And then if they do, the military's footing their pay on this during that time frame. The one stipulation on this program is it can be at no cost to the transitioning service member.
Okay, what about benefits? Are they still like on a Cobra plan on they're getting their military benefits? What is any commitment or
Yeah.
expectation?
There's none. I mean, it's the biggest thing we have to do is provide a safe environment for the transitioning service member. And they have to work. They have to work 40 hours a week, and it's not a piece to where you can just pull them in and they do nothing. Um, because the service member has a vote here too, the transitioning service. If they don't feel like they are being enabled to be able to have a good transition, to be able to take on a job so that they can provide for themselves or their family at the end of this. I mean, they can throw the BS flag too and say, I'm out.
Mm,
So, there's a commitment on the contractor side to make sure that they are providing an opportunity for that transitioning service member.
mm.
And that's our commitment.
So let's talk specific restoration positions, and you can say fit, no fit. This is great, works for
Yeah.
all of these positions. Restoration technician.
I don't think that would be the perfect fit for this.
Yeah. Okay.
It could be for certain people, but probably not.
Restoration department manager.
Yes, 100%.
Mitigation, like mold remediation, sorry, not mitigation, mold remediation technician or site superintendent project manager, working
Yes.
project manager. Okay. Uh, Administrative coordinator, clerical office person doing compliance and file notes and basically the back end part of project management.
Yes.
Okay. Job site superintendent for reconstruction projects.
100%.
HR, people come out of the military with human resource management skill set.
We can actually recruit for that for HR. There would have to be someone more in the office administrative aspect of it.
Okay.
But
Okay.
that would, as long as we tailor that requisition
Okay.
and translate that for them to understand what that's going to do, yes.
Okay. Bookkeeper, financial, like data input, clerical.
I would say yes, but it's going to be still the same. It's going to be we
Okay.
have to tailor that requisition to be able to do it. But yes,
Okay.
it would be
Perfect.
harder. It's definitely, yeah.
Okay. Marketing rep, representative, business development.
Business development, I'd say yes if it's the right rank and they had the right position.
Okay. General management of a restoration, maybe a standalone satellite office or of the main company.
100%. Someone that's definitely has more military time 20 years, absolutely straight up their alley.
Okay, perfect. Did I miss anything that kind of would fit in that? Did I miss any of the positions, contents? But that probably fits in with the mitigation.
Anything within a team lead or manager level is absolutely going to transition. You
Okay.
know, um, yeah, 100%. And then as you start getting into the higher ranks of those people transitioning, now we're talking about a potential general manager, someone potentially is going to run your department, someone that is going to absolutely going to be able to bring 20 plus years of leadership and development of people to your organization and structure.
Okay. You had mentioned in one of your statements up to 5 months. Or what is there a window on this? So they're working in a restoration company, their compensation, they're being compensated and paid by the military. And in that payment, so first of all, limitation, let's answer that question, and I'll ask my next.
So it depends on when they're ready to leave and get out of the service, right? It depends on the service. The Air Force has a different time limit than the Navy and the Army and that piece of it, and it also determines on the rank. Okay, um, so the program can be approved for up to 180 days, depending on some of those parameters.
Okay.
And then, so let's just
Okay.
say that we have somebody that's transitioning and they take full advantage of the 180-day program. If they enter into it, there will be a piece where we have to make the connection. But then, our 30-day training, because we have to train them. That's part of the program too. They have to receive training beforehand. And then when they go out, they would have, let's say 5 months at optimize the whole thing. They'd have 5 months to be able to work at the restoration company. If
Okay.
they only had 90 days, then they would have 2 months to work at the restoration company and 30 days for the training.
The second question, follow-up question was what the compensation level is. Are they paid? I mean, you're paying them what their military rank and pay was, you or the military is, and then they're transitioning. Do you find or conceive that this is just going to be a lateral move, or does the military pay higher because for whatever reason? Where are people typically coming in and landing in the restoration company? They've been working there for a short period of time and getting a paycheck from the military. Now they're transitioning into civilian life with a civilian paycheck. What does that typically look like in that transition period and for the compensation? And what have you found, or what is your expectation?
Yeah, that's a great question. First of all, for people who are not familiar with the military has different ranks, right? They have enlisted, which is kind of your blue collar, and then they have officers, which is more your white collar. And so, if you have a lieutenant colonel that's transitioned that wants to come in and help run your company, you are probably not going to get that person in less than 120, $150,000 because that's what they were making in the military, at that military on that piece of it. But we're talking more executive level at that point, right? Because
Hmm.
we're also not just doing this for the restoration industry, by the way. We do this for the defense industry, we're doing it for the medical industry, for office staff. So we're not limited to just the restoration and construction industry. And so let's say that we have, and it also depends on your location. Let's say you have an E6 that's been in the Army or for six years, and they're making, I'm not really the pay right in front of me. Let's say they're making around 55, $60,000.
Hmm.
And they go into a smaller, let's go Colorado Springs where I had my company at. You know, we're probably going to transition somewhere right around that with minimal experience and stuff like that. We're probably going to start them out around that 60 to 65 junior project manager level if that's what we're shooting for, right?
Hmm.
Of course, if we have a project administrator, project coordinator they're going for, that's probably not going to be that much. So it's going to be compensated what you want to attract them at, and also based on their skill set. And the good thing about it, if we get to maximize the program, even if it's for 90 days, you didn't have to pay somebody $75,000 to come in for you to try to figure out 90 days later they were the wrong fit because you couldn't recruit the right person or you
Yep.
chose the wrong person because they said all the right things to you and it sounded like a great honeymoon match. And then 90 days later, you're like, what the heck was I thinking? Or they may be same thing, or why not pick this culture? So it's going to depend on the area. It's going to depend on what the experience is. The benefit behind this program, if it works for you, is you get to try it before you buy it. I actually had a CB, which is a Navy person,
Mm.
who actually came and worked in my company as a carpenter
Ah,
for 3 months. Yeah, and so because we had a program there with with the military back then where they would transition for 16 weeks into a carpenter. And so we bring them over and they would augment our teams once a week so we could take them out on jobs so they could actually see what it was like. And so we had a couple of
Mm.
Navy Seabees who were actual carpenters in the Navy who came in to do that.
Wow. Okay. So that's a position we didn't even talk about. I talk about positions. Do you recommend this for carpenters? They're typically hired a different skill set than a mitigation technician, which you said not so much. But does this specific program, work for carpenters?
It depends on the person, I mean, if you think about if we're not training carpenters, I'll tell you that. So we're looking more at the mid-level management, okay, because that takes a while. That's a trade that doesn't happen overnight.
Yep.
Um, even though I've hired people coming out of the military very early on who wanted to do that we put as a helper and transition, but I would think that would not be the position you'd want to pick up on this one. And so he said, "Hey, Philip, I want to be a carpenter. Can you help me out?" I mean, we would definitely try to set him up for success, but you're going to be taking on a
Yeah.
project.
Probably so. I used to be a fan. There was a book, it was called The Lead Carpenter Concept. I can't remember. It came out of Victoria Downing's group, and it was called The Lead Carpenter Concept, where the lead carpenter was managing the budget of the job that they're working on. And it was
Yeah.
basically turnkey job. I think something like that may work because there's a lot of leadership, there's a lot of project management, but they're actually pounding the nails on the job or running a sub if there's things they couldn't do, but you're giving them a $25,000 job and saying, here, go budget schedule, figure this out, work with the subs, and then bring it back to me on margin. And I think that something like that might work.
Yeah, it's a perfect fit. If you think about a foreman superintendent type person that's even there,
Mm.
and usually your lead carpenter knows quite a bit of stuff who can do punch lists and stuff. And a lot of times our foreman, we would want to do that too. But if you're looking for a foreman that can run roofing crews, subcontractors, schedule, budget, some of those things that roll up into a project manager's realm, absolutely. That would be a great position for especially a young person
Yeah.
coming, that's got 6, 8 years of experience in the military.
Okay, so for this to work, somebody's making money on it, and I'm suspecting there is some cost to Trifecta. There's something that comes in that the company is obligated to and committed to. Explain what that looks like.
Yeah, so the first time when you partner with us, there is a onboarding fee that we have to get you in the system. We have to prep that. There is fees that we have to kind of get together to work with you on getting your requisite, and that's kind of our basic price. So it's either going to be our base, our pro, or a premium package, and
Okay.
that also goes into our base package is we looked at it. We said, well, how is small companies going to be able to do this? And so we said, you know what, maybe they have up to two requisites a year that they can do in their basic package. So, and then our pro package is up to 5, and then our premium package is up to 10. And then you can transition if you decide, hey, you know what, I moved from my basic, I'm ready to go from the basic to the pro. You can just move over, you just take the change in dollar amount for the requisite. So we do charge that to get you on board and become a partner with us so we can do all the back end stuff to make sure that you are represented well and we have the right job, we're attracting the right people.
Okay.
The second thing is somebody's got to train them. We know that most restoration companies do not have a good training program or have something on onboarding, and so we are taking that because a part of our stipulation of this program is we just don't throw them out there to figure it out. They
Hmm.
don't we don't figure it out. So we give them some minimal viable training for them to be able to get out and perform. And so the truck contractor does pay for that, for
Okay, and
us to do that training. Now,
that's the 4 week program, right? Okay.
correct. Mhm.
Okay.
And then the last piece of it is as we will check in every month that we have to update that, and we have to keep the service notified how that's doing or not. And with the contractor, at the end of that period, if you actually offer that service member a job and they accept it, then we ask for a placement fee, and that placement fee is for every month they were there.
Oh, okay. Okay. So for those months they were working for you for free, this is so
Yeah.
that which is fantastic. I don't you made money off of an employee while they were training. Where does that happen? But there are those
Yeah.
costs. It sounds to me that there is a commitment from the contractor. I don't know if it's more or less than the salary would have been had they been there, but I think that regardless, when we're
Oh yeah.
looking at onboarding an employee, it's costing us tens of thousands of dollars for the learning curve anyhow. And so now we have a formal program. We have somebody that's brought to you. There's a search that goes, and you try to place somebody. You give them candidates to interview, and then you give them a training that's built in before they ever show up, so they understand the industry and leadership roles, expectations, insurance programs, TPAs, the whatever the required customer service requirements, things that are unique to our industry. So now it's sort of like hiring somebody from another restoration company without the baggage.
Absolutely.
Okay.
It is definitely, it costs a lot less than you taking a chance on someone and
Okay.
figured it out 90 days later.
So not getting into the details of what the costs are, because I think the part of the reason is that every company is going to be a little bit different and they can cater that. So if I'm sitting here and I'm saying, okay, Rod, this is really exciting. I love the idea, but I'm not going to come to you with a blank checkbook. How do I find out more specific information for my company for what I need? And then getting a real hard number. I'm assuming I get a hard number if I tell you I have three positions I want to fill right now. One of them's a superintendent, one's a coordinator, and one's a department manager. So what's that going to cost me? I'm assuming they can reach you, they can find out and get that exact number before they're committed to anything.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, they can visit our website at trifectagrowthinstitute.com /hire a veteran program. There's a form on there that they can say partner with us. That's going to give us some information what you're looking for. We schedule a consult with you to see if you're a good fit, if we're a good fit for you, see if it's something you want to engage in, and then we give you all the information. Just to let you know on the front end, this isn't an open check at the very beginning. We charge a very minimal fee to get you partnered with us. We got to have some commitment
Hmm.
because we're going to be doing work, and so that's not free. Um, but it's no, but you're also it's less than what you're going to promote on ZipRecruiter or Indeed per month for that piece of it. And so that's your first piece. When we sign the agreement, that's what's due. You
Okay.
know, when we there's nothing else due until we find a candidate for you.
Yep.
And so we'll continue to promote, recruit, try to get that, make a good connection. And that stays active the whole time. And once we make the connection and you get to interview, because you get to choose, you don't just, it's not like we're just giving you somebody. We want you to have, I mean, you have to, we got to make sure, we look at three parts of the mind when we recruit. And that's on the cognitive piece, which is always the resume, their experiences and stuff like that. That's what we're taking away and helping you do. But really, when we start looking at the effective piece, are they going to fit in our culture? Do they fit with what we're looking for? A lot of times people will say that's a personality test. And then the third part, we look at the cognitive piece of the mind, and that's the doing. Because, oh, by the way, when we look at a candidate on this piece, they take a cognitive index with us, and we'll tell you if they're going to be the right fit for that job or not. And, so if we don't think if all of a sudden you say, hey, I'm looking for a project manager and they're not geared to be a project manager, we're not going to say, hey, by the way, just take this person because we don't feel like if it's not a right fit. So
Hmm.
there's a huge benefit to that piece of it too. Um, but once we marry you up with that and you say, yeah, hey, Rod, we want to go with, Philip, then at that point, we would collect your training fee for them. We would
Okay.
schedule the time for them to come into the training. This training fee, we'd schedule the date for them to be at your company for the internship on the job training. Then nothing else is due until you actually hire the person,
Hmm. Wow. Okay.
and so it's pretty low. I think it's a pretty low cost. I mean, it's cheaper probably than what you're doing if you're hiring a headhunter. Um, and you get training with it. So
Yeah, well, that's fantastic. And I think that's why I was happy to kind of just explore a little bit of the Trifecta Growth Institute because they get the best of both worlds. And then the neat thing for you is when you have this new employee coming in and they've got this skill set and this training, you may look and say, hey, let's open this up for the rest of the company because look at what they came to the table with. So it's a win-win all the way around. And I kind of like that. It gives people the opportunity to sort of sample it, try it before they buy it for the rest of the company as well, and say this is really cool. So I like how that's all working out. Rod, I don't know if there was anything else that you wanted to cover in our time here.
No, Philip, I really appreciate you having me on and getting the information out there for the Hire a Veteran program. It's something that I was a veteran, and so it's one of the things I feel like it's transitioning other people into the civilian world. I know when I made that transition, I wish I'd had something like this. It was I tell people a lot of times when I left the military, I felt like I was getting paroled because I I, I didn't know how to market myself. I didn't know how to transition or translate my skill set to the rest of the world. And so I felt like I had to go into the defense industry because it was a natural fit.
Mm.
And what I see a lot of times is not everybody is geared to transition into the defense industry, and so they struggle a little bit. So for us being able to help them, it's a really great give back for me and Trifecta Growth Institute. And I feel like that we're doing a great service for companies out there that are looking to actually tap into that skill set.
Yeah. Well, Rod, first, thank you for your service. And I'm going to correct you at the risk of being tortured by a Green Beret. Um, you said I was a veteran. I think you'll always be a veteran. And thank you for your service to our country and thank you for
Thank
what you've done. And we appreciate that. Um, this program is really exciting. It just to me just seems like this win 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 all the way around the board. One of the things I always hear back is that restorers no, I don't hear this, but I know this to be true. Restorers have, most of them are very poor at orientation, at onboarding, at bringing people in and helping them be aware. It's hard to find really good people. It's hard to keep really good people, and it's just a confusing process. And so what you've done is you've overcome all of that. You've given the onboarding, you help with the orientation, you have screened through the employees, you've given us access to a really great resource and I know that there's a lot of people who have tried something like this. And your program, Rod, really seems like it brings a lot of the tools together. And I think it's exciting. I love the idea of bringing retired military people into the workforce because I think that skill set, and at the risk of being redundant here, but the skill set is pretty phenomenal for what we're doing as restorers. And so across the board, I think this is just a great idea. How are they going to get a hold of you? I think you've given us your websites and all that. I'm going to try to have it posted on the bottom or connected to this podcast as well. But how do they get a hold of you? Phone numbers, emails, all the fancy stuff that they're going to need to track you down.
Yeah, absolutely. You can reach out to us at 720-969-6061, or you could also email us at info@trifecta-growth.com. And then our website is trifectagrowthinstitute.com.
Okay. We didn't talk about this in the lead into this, but are there offers out there or places that they could note what we're doing here and get any sort of a discount or opportunity?
Absolutely. So if you would, you can use the EDGE, EDGE, when you fill out that form, and that will notify us that they got this from your show, Phil. And then that will also tag them into our database with when we pull them in, and we'll know where that came and what we can do for them.
Okay. Yeah. Fantastic. I appreciate that, Rod. And I wish you great success for this because when you're successful, the restorers will be successful and the returning military members are also going to be successful. So top to bottom, this is really fantastic. Thank you very much for your time today. And I look forward to seeing you around industry events. Thank you, Rod.
That sounds great. Thanks, Philip.